Hey y'all, welcome to Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin. I'm Mandy. I'm just a mom sitting down having real conversations with real Texas parents about what's going on in our schools. Today, we are going to dive in to what everybody in the legislature is talking about. HB2. That is the Public Education School Finance Bill. We've got a lot of great details that we're going to cover, and everybody should be happy with the way the Senate has fixed some of the problems and is making sure to serve our teachers and our kids. I'm joined today by my colleague, Jorge Borrego, who's going to go over all the highlights and answer any questions that you can have about what is in HB2. Jorge, thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
So you have taken the liberty, I'm very grateful for it, to break down all the really wonderful aspects of HB2 and with the Senate substitute for HB2. And as I'm looking at this, the first thing that jumps out is teacher pay. We've been talking for years about how 60 cents on the dollar is steered out of our classrooms. Too much money is going to the lobbyists and the consultants and the construction, and it's not getting to our teachers, the most important aspect of the education system that it really dictates how well our kids will do. So talk to me a little bit about what teachers can expect to see in HB2.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that we know with a lot of experience and a lot of research, that the number one impact that students have on their likelihood to succeed is how high performing their teachers are, right? And so we want to incentivize, and the Senate wants to incentivize, keeping those highest performing teachers employed in the profession, keeping them retained, and also rewarding and incentivizing them for those for all their hard work.
That's huge.
It is.
That's great. Okay, teachers should be celebrating that. It gets even better. Can we talk a little bit about the teacher incentive allotment? So when we talk about the opportunity for these high-performing teachers that are doing an excellent job for our kids in their classrooms, the teacher incentive allotment is a program that districts can opt into. And so we've removed some barriers to participate, but also I see here that these great teachers who are in the classroom for several years that are doing God's work, in my opinion, can get up to $36,000 more dollars for their work if they participate in this program. Talk to us about what that is and what it looks like for great teachers.
Yeah. So the teacher incentive allotment was a great addition that was provided by the legislature a few years back. And one of the biggest hurdles that a lot of districts have had to accessing this tremendous resources has been a lot of the a lot of the box checking that they have to do back on the administrative side. Yeah. So Senate Bill or House Bill 2 seeks to just get rid of a lot of that, making it a lot more accessible for those school districts, so they could then go ahead and reward their teachers on that are performing the best. So if you are it also creates a new category, making it easier for more teachers to access the teacher incentive allotment. So if you are now in that new acknowledged in the top 50% of teachers, you get a pay raise of up to $9,000. And if you're in that 5% bracket, the top 5% in the state, that's where you get that $36,000 bonus.
That's fantastic. And just to confirm, that teacher incentive allotment, districts must opt in to participate in that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So we need to ensure that our teachers and parents know that they need to be encouraging their district leaders that, we've heard some complaints that maybe the administrative burden created an obstacle to getting into it. But some of those burdens have been relieved or reduced, and now we should be incentivizing every single district and really encouraging those superintendents and board of trustees to participate in the teacher incentive allotment so that we can really make sure that our great teachers are incentivized and receiving pay for their work.
That's right? Absolutely right.
Okay, awesome. A couple other things that should be celebrated for teachers is free pre-K. I think that is fantastic that we are giving particularly our young mothers, who a lot of times the reality is a lot of women want to go into the teaching profession. They're called to it for two reasons. They love children and they want to educate them. And also it provides flexibility for those of us that want to have families. So I'm really excited to see that they've put in free pre-K for teachers who want to stay in the classrooms and their kids are in that age range. So good job for making that happen. And then another thing for the teachers is state-supported liability insurance for teachers. So what does that do?
Yeah. So one of the biggest concerns that teachers have, right, is the fear of they might be sued, or the fear that they might do something wrong, especially if you're on the SPED side. Yeah. And a lot of teachers unions, that's the big benefit that they try to offer you and try to get you to incite them to join their union. So the state said, well, we can we have our teachers back. We could definitely offer this liability insurance on their part. They're teaching our TEKS. We should be able to cover them.
I love that, and I wanted to highlight that part because you said it. The unions and the associations, the TASBs and the ATPE and all these other association entities that create this groupthink, and they try and offer sweeteners to our teachers to get them in and make them a part of this massive industry that, again, does not benefit teachers. I love that they have taken the reins and said, teachers, you no longer have to be a part of the Texas Association of School Boards, Texas Association of School Administrators, AFT, Texas, or any of these other unions that, again, dangle a carrot and then lock you into a system that actually doesn't serve you and doesn't serve our kids. So kudos on that. Another awesome thing for teachers is the mentorship allotment. So one of the reasons that they're saying that the pay, obviously, the longer you go in your career, the better you get. And if you are an excellent teacher and you have the ability to help guide some of our young, newer teachers, there's a benefit, another way for you to get an added $3,000. Talk to us a little bit about what the mentorship program does.
Yeah, absolutely. So in districts where we're now incentivizing a grow your own program, a mentor teacher can be assigned. A teacher that is a high performing leader on their campus can now become a mentor teacher and get an additional $3,000. So they're getting their additional $10,000 from the permanent pay raise, and if they're a mentor teacher teaching the next generation of teachers, they get an additional $3,000. So they could be looking at $13,000 permanent total.
Well, this is exciting to hear about the benefits and the incentive to teachers. Let's talk a little bit now about the Educator Bill of Rights that is in HB2. I'm excited to see this because something that we've been talking a lot about on my podcast with parents and teachers and school leaders, quite frankly, is the inability to get in their instructional minutes, and that's often, almost always, due to disruptions and discipline issues in the classroom where children are not in the right placement. As I've been taught by teachers that have been here, they're not in the right placement, meaning they're not in the right environment. They're not in the right classroom that's serving these kids. So let's start off by talking about the teacher time study and how that will benefit our teachers.
Absolutely. So, Mandy, as you mentioned there, the number one complaint teachers have is their discipline issues that they're seeing. And the Senate recognizes that. So one aspect that they're trying to get at is really seeing, well, how much time throughout the day are teachers actually devoted to instructional use and actual devoted to making sure that they're having time to craft their lessons plans for the rest of the week. Every teacher has a conference period to help plan for those times, but you talk to any teacher in the state, that gets
eaten up.
It gets eaten up, blown over by 100 different things and tasks. So we want to make sure that we're actually providing teachers what they ought to be allotted, or they are entitled to under law.
That's awesome. I will also throw in a plug here for the Blue Bonnet curriculum, which really is just an open and go curriculum that would benefit a lot of teachers. I hope that more districts, we're seeing massive gains in the children whose districts have adopted the Blue Bonnet curriculum. And we've seen the teachers be excited because it is so much easier. They're not going on oftentimes these radical websites that give, content and lesson plans that maybe a teacher may not realize that it is really destructive. I know that that's where I had heard the teacher down in the San Antonio area a couple years ago that was doing the separating the kids by the color of their skin to teach a history lesson. It came off of an online website. I just cannot stress this enough. The Blue Bonnet curriculum is written to make teachers' lives easier and to provide a higher quality education. So I'm excited to hear that teachers are being given enough time and it's being protected so that they can plan and prepare for all their lessons. So one of my favorite things in this bill, outside of making sure that our great teachers are receiving the pay for their excellent work is discipline. Discipline, discipline, discipline. We talk about this nonstop. For our viewers that may not realize, back during the Obama era, this restorative justice nonsense was pushed through out of the Department of Education into the states. And basically they said you can't discipline kids, particularly black and brown kids, because that's racist. We have seen this just decimate teachers' ability to control their classrooms across the board, because now they've just stopped disciplining. It didn't matter what color the kid's skin is, what their race or background is. All these kids are being put into a classroom, and oftentimes there's just one or two children that are being disruptive. They're in the wrong placement. They're not in the right environment for their needs. And it has not only caused issues, obviously, with education for kids, but teachers are demoralized. They are totally demoralized. They are leaving the profession. So talk to us about what are the benefits in HB2 for teachers in the Teacher Bill of Rights for discipline.
Yeah, absolutely. The number one thing that I could say that is a highlight on the Teacher's Bill of Rights is the removal by teacher. So if you have a student who is disruptive, a teacher has the right to remove them from their classroom and allow them to continue on with their lessons. And it benefits all the other children because now they're able to learn and they have that one disruptive force. Any veteran teacher will tell you it just takes one student or two students to completely derail a whole day's worth of lessons. And so by giving a teacher the ability to remove a student, they could get back to focusing on what is actually needed. And it provides a little bit of consequences to the students who know that they can't just do whatever they'd like whenever they don't want to do their work, right? We're providing that structure and discipline that will help benefit them as they progress through life. One last thing too is this is even in the case of a certain incident that they could remove this. So, and this is in particular in the case of if you have a student who might be violent, especially if in the older grades, a teacher shouldn't have to have a long history of being threatened physically before they're allowed to elevate that to administration. If you're being threatened in the classroom physically, then you should have the right to remove that student from your classroom.
I am just so excited to hear this because that is the complaint that I hear all the time. When I had the benefit of traveling our great state and talking to teachers, particularly from the public school, they would come to events with the governor and myself to learn about the parent empowerment movement. And part of that was empowering teachers across the board, including in our public schools, to be able to take control of their classrooms. I am thrilled to hear this. I do think that this should incentivize the system to recognize that the one size fits all does not fit every kid's. And if a child is in the wrong placement, if they have anger issues, if they have trauma responses, if they have these problems that they need significant help for, they should not be mainstreamed, forced into a classroom that causes them to feel dysregulated or out of control, and then in turn disrupt the learning for all the other kids. I'm so excited to hear about this opportunity for our great teachers. Okay, so something else that we are always hearing about in the special education area is a lot of times districts are complaining about the cost of the special education evaluation. And this comes up also because for those parents that want to utilize a school choice with education savings accounts, they also have to go through the public school system for their child's diagnosis or evaluation and subsequent diagnosis. So it's really exciting because they are jumping from what to what on these evaluations.
Yeah, on the evaluation front, so currently we are reimbursing school districts at $250 per evaluation. Okay. That's not going to jump up to $1,000. So we're 4xing the evaluation, so they should have that's incredible. No monetary complaint on why they can't perform these evaluations.
Yeah, that is huge. I am thrilled to see that is a part of this package because we certainly do not want to create artificial barriers to children getting assessed and receiving the services that they need. So even if people don't necessarily realize it, when you've got leaders or others looking at how much it costs to do things, we hear a lot of times about the slow walking of these evaluations. And so it is really important that parents know that there is no financial barrier or incentive to not get your child in quickly, get them evaluated quickly. And I know that is going to be huge for families families in the special needs community. So excited to hear about that. Okay, George, so when we're looking at the $8 billion that is in House Bill 2, the Senate committee sub of House Bill 2, there's $8 billion. What are we looking at in the reforms that we've talked about thus far between teacher pay and special education services? How much are we spending, and how should people see this as a benefit to our kids?
Yeah. So of the $8 billion, 4.4 of that is going to go straight to teacher pay raise increases. So more than half of it is going to be dedicated permanently towards teachers and making sure we have the best teachers in the country. That I cannot stress how important that is.
Yep.
On the special education side, that's an additional $1.2 billion that the education system will be getting.
Okay. All right. So we're approaching the $6 billion mark. So let's talk about where the other remaining funds are going to be spent with this bill. So let's go into the pre-K partnerships. How is that going to look?
Yeah. So the way essentially a school district can have a in-house pre-K service, but they could also partner with a third-party partnership, and some of those reimbursement rates can vary, and that puts a lot of stress on those partners, right? A lot of those are really high-quality programs, and so what HB2 does is that it requires that 85% of the new funding that it's providing has to go to those partnership programs. So we want to try to fund as much as possible when it comes to pre-K, and we want to make sure we're funding the right things. We're not funding administration, we're funding those in those programs, those curriculums.
That is so important because, as we've talked about, again, for years, the amount of money that is not given directly to classrooms to be used directly for students that, flows out and we never see it again, and it's not benefiting our kids. So I'm thrilled to see that. And then the next thing that I want to talk about, I'm just thrilled about this bill because this is another thing that is so close to my heart. I talk about phonics. We have 50 years worth of data that says that phonics is the far superior method of teaching children to read. And yet we think that somewhere between 30 and 40% of districts still use whole language, which is, if parents don't know, phonics, obviously learning the phonetic makeup of the English language, which helps your kids decode words for the rest of their life. They will always know how to, regardless of what they're reading, decode what they're reading. And it makes you read faster, and you be able to actually internalize and understand, comprehend what the child is reading, versus the whole language method, which is essentially just memorization. You're using 3-cueing, so you're looking around at the context, which of course is important, but if you don't have the phonetic makeup, you are setting a child up for failure. So I'm thrilled to hear about it. Talk to us about what the science of reading is doing here in HB2.
Yeah. Mandy, I know you're a big fan, but Chairman Creighton's also a very big fan of making sure all our kids can read at grade level. So we passed a law a few sessions back that required the science of reading in the classroom. But one thing that was left out was those assessments and materials that students get on whether they're still teaching, or they're still requiring that whole language or the phonics. So what this does is it requires that any assessments and materials that are presented to a teacher and students in those first couple years of school have to be based off the science of reading, instead of being graded on whole language.
I think that is so exciting. It's so exciting because let's just tell the quiet part out loud. 50% of our kids in Texas, in our public schools, cannot read on grade level. There are over 5 million kids. That's over 2.5 million kids right now that cannot read in grade level. If you cannot read on grade level, you cannot reach your full potential. You can't fill out a job application. This has set children back for decades, and I am thrilled to see that this is now going to be a part of the approach for anyone who is not utilizing the science of reading and phonics-based reading education for our kids. I think I really do project that with the introduction of education savings accounts and the science of reading being introduced, that we are going to see our kids in the next decade jump to the top of the country. This is a game changer, and I'm so thrilled to see that it's in there. I hope that every single district will take that seriously and make sure that they're training, providing the instructional materials for their teachers. Okay, so we know about my love of the science of reading and phonics. I think it will change the lives of literally millions of kids. I'm excited. But that is a great segue into it's not just for our young kids. Let's talk a little bit about the SBEC powers over educator preparation providers. Let's hear how the science of reading is incorporated into that.
Absolutely. So following along with the chairman's vision of having all our kids able to read, he is also making some changes on the State Board of Education certification, and that basically is mandating that or is requiring that the science of reading is incorporated into those certifications. He's also adding some more additional teacher certifications, and importantly, now the reading academies and the math academies do have to be done while you're becoming a teacher instead of what is currently being done, which is after you get your teaching job.
Right.
A lot of teachers are going through these additional requirements. So everything has to be incorporated on the front side so they could go in and
Ready
be
to go.
effective.
I love to hear that. It also takes you back. We just released a podcast with our colleague Kate Beerley, who went through one of the leading institutions in our country, Stanford's Masters of Education, and she acknowledged and admitted a whole host of things, but that she had never even heard of the science of reading. Not only that, but they never even taught. They never taught these young adults who were planning to go into the classroom, not only about the science of reading, but about phonics in general. They did not teach them how to teach reading. That's not just at Stanford. I'm just pointing that out because that is across the nation, and that is in Texas. We are not teaching those that are going through the colleges of education and that want to go into the education profession how to teach reading. So this ensuring, while we can't necessarily do anything with HB2 to change what's going on at the collegiate level, although I hope they start to see what kids need as they're coming out, this makes sure that when our teachers go into the classroom, they have been taught utilizing the science of reading so that they're not, if they maybe they were taught whole language or whatever, that they are actually prepared to teach phonics to our young readers throughout their education experience. So I think that is absolutely incredible, and I'm so grateful that the chairman shares my passion for making sure that children can read. So, okay, before we wrap up, let's go talk to other really important finance reforms that are in HB 2.
Yeah. So other big changes, the small school districts, so like the rural school districts, will be seeing a big bump in how much money they're receiving so that to go benefit. We've seen a lot of small districts go to a 4-day work week because of money problems. And so essentially this is trying to fund those entire 5 days.
So George, you for the first time have brought up the issue that what I would say a lot of uninformed people that have been misled, misdirected by those that control billions of dollars, and that is the basic allotment. You were one of the leading voices out there for the past year explaining that the basic allotment is literally just an entry point. It's really only about a third of the money that each child receives. So to be clear with all of our viewers, last year in the 2023-2024 school year, Texas spent $100 billion. They spent $100 billion, which came out to $18,125 per student. You can find this at the Texas Education Agency, who keeps track of how all of the spending is utilized across our 1,200 school districts. So $100 billion, $18,125 per kid. But we constantly hear about basic allotment, and it's not enough, it's not enough. Why is the basic allotment such a huge talking point? And why is it important for people to understand that, yes, it's important that we increase it, but why is all the funding, why is the $18,000 that we're currently spending not just the basic allotment?
Yeah, absolutely. So you said it so well in the introduction. The basic allotment is just that. It's the starting point. It is what every child at minimum is guaranteed. And when we go look at the $18,125 number, we also have to remember that these are numbers that are reported by school districts to TEA on how much they're spending, right? So it's the school district saying, and then TEA then audits that, making sure that's actually what they're spending. So these are numbers that the school districts themselves are saying they're spending, not TEA is saying that is being spent.
This is the expenditures, because that's different than the funding, right? This is what districts are reporting. And let's also be real clear. This is the money, the cash money that's coming out of the pockets, the bank accounts of every Texan. So when they try and say, oh, it's only this much, no, we can all look at our property tax bill. We are being taxed out the wazoo, which is another issue that we're trying to tackle in the problems that are plaguing the finance system and property tax payers. But it's really important that we say basic allotment is the starting point. Yes, it's important to increase it. No, it's not all of the money. And the reason that it is going, you've got some of the larger school districts, they're out putting out videos complaining. The reason the small and mid-sized school adjustment is larger, right, is because of economies of scale.
Right.
We need to make sure that in our rural and suburban, our smaller school districts, they don't have as many kids there, and that economies of scale really does affect their operations. And that's why it's important that we make sure that they have a different adjustment.
No, that's absolutely right. And those small districts are the ones that oftentimes have the, they're the ones that teach the best. Their heart is where they need to be, and they just don't have the student population enough for them to keep drawing down enough money to keep paying for those older facilities.
I'm thrilled to see this. Overall, this is an absolutely incredible bill. Chairman Creighton did a phenomenal job making sure that we are really putting taxpayer dollars where it's meant to go, in the classroom for our kids. I cannot praise him enough on this incredible piece of legislation. And I just want to make sure that all of our viewers know and recognize that there is some misinformation out there, and it's usually coming from your superintendents and your high up level who, of course, they want to be able to steer money where they want. They need to make sure they have their $500,000 paychecks and car allotments, and some of them get housing allotments and paying for fancy conferences put on by TASB, and all of this is coming out of your pockets, people. But this is a great way to make sure money is going to our teachers, money is being used to educate the next generation for Texas. George, thank you for putting this up. For anybody that would like to see more about HB2, understand where all of these provisions are and how you can also fight for your great teachers and your kids in your classrooms, go to txparentsmatter.com and you can see a rundown on all of this. Thank you so much for joining us. George, thank you for your incredible work on really taking all of this apart, breaking it down so that we can all understand it. Thank you for joining us today on Parent Power with Mandy Drogin, and now you have the power.